Okay, new video. The PDs have gotten some water. They went out and they did their business out there. We got a little sunshine, some vitamin D, and now we are we're happy. We are happy. The day was eventful without being excessive. Yeah. We're happy. It's a beautiful park. I can't imagine, here's a tent right here. Coming across a tent. And at least that tent has some privacy. They have water bottles. They got themselves stationed pretty well. And then there's some RVs out here. For sure. For sure. You can see the beautiful RVs. Boats. So, I guess this is the way you get on out of here. You get on out of here this way. Looks like there's somebody else coming down here to see about this park. Yep, they're reading the sign too, like, what is this? Are they charging? Can we get in? Can we visit? And sometimes, they'll have like a little box where you can make a deposit of money, even if it's not, guarded. But this didn't even have a cash box. So, yeah. And they got a train track going through here. Huh. So this was just beautiful. So yeah, it says U.S. Army Corps of Engineer. So this is what made me think that this park might have been developed and maintained by the Army, right? In particular, the group of engineers that are in the Army. Car garage? What the hell? A 4-car garage. 5, because there's a garage attached to the house. Woo-wee. Yeah, these people got acreage out here at Lake Ridge Meadows. And for $400, they'll put lights on your mansion. For Christmas. Trying to see what this water reservoir says. It looks like it says Bear Creek Sub. nice. So you know they got charitable tax exclusions. Collin County. Look like somebody done grew some corn out here. Okay. Well, that concludes my sightseeing adventure. God only knows where I would go if I had the time, the money, and a nice, dependable vehicle. Cause I get to moving, and yeah, who knows where I'd end up. Which is one reason why, I don't understand people who will go somewhere where there's no water. You have to go somewhere where there's water. Right? And yes, microorganisms live in the water. Every drop of water has microorganisms in it. Every single drop of water. There is no such thing as a drop of water that has no microorganisms in it at all. Okay? So this looks kind of cute. These are little itty bitty duplexes that you can lease out, and it looks like you can also have covered parking, not a garage, but covered parking. So that could be nice. Yeah, it's Bear Creek Sud. S-U-D. I don't know what Sud means. That's what it's called. Bear Creek Sud. So here's another thing that they were talking about. They keep talking about Black Rock, right? And what they're saying about Black Rock is that Black Rock has so much money and so much control, and they're so powerful, and yet nobody knows who they are and how they're able to operate. So based off of this sign here, it says I'm 30 miles outside of Dallas, because it says Dallas is 30 miles. So I think it's talking about the city limits, Dallas, because downtown Dallas is a lot further than that. So this is a Grand Heritage development with water parks. Nice. And we've seen a lot of that go up in the last 20 years, where they'll have these whole developments that will have their own water park, their own daycare, their own school. You know, they would be locked in. Right? They would be locked in. And a lot of these homes are expensive, right? Those homes usually start just as of the Peace Precinct. Their homes usually start at about $500,000. So now I'm trying to figure out, okay, now that you done bought this expensive home, right? You bought this expensive home, this $500,000, $750,000, this $1 million home, you know, how are you able to maintain that in this economy? Right? Now, everybody got devastated one way or another, you know, with the pandemic. Now, there were people who did, you know, capitalize off of the demise of others, right? And they claim that they did it out of necessity. Yes? I would like to say congratulations to everybody who did not fall as a result of the pandemic, right? If you were able to maintain your ethics, your dignity, your inherent morality, congratulations, right? You are not going to be a part of the ones that are going to be suffering the judgment of Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay? Now, you have to understand that a lot of people did not maintain their integrity. They did not. And they succumbed and for the longest they have been telling people, you know, that the ones who maintain their integrity, you know, are the ones that are ass out. And I'm going to tell the ones who maintain your integrity that you are not ass out. Okay? You're not. You just need to realize that there are more people who have no integrity and who is weak in spirit than you realize. Right? And this is why a lot of people who are like, oh my gosh, you know, am I the black sheep? Am I the curse breaker? Am I, you know, am I evil? Because this is where you'll have the people in their abundance, right, try to say that you are the outlier. You are the outsider. You are the evil one. You are, because if they don't say that, they wouldn't be able to handle the fact that they have, created a mob tyrannical mentality that under normal circumstances they would not be able to tolerate seeing happen to their loved ones, their neighbors, to even a stranger, right? So they prefer the notion of saying, well, maybe they have karma, right? Maybe they have some past life. Maybe they're suffering, bloodline, right? But let's face it, if this is true, right? Let's go back to what we were talking about. How do you not face consequences for giving people tainted food, right? Food that's tainted with starches, food that's tainted with preservatives, that, and pesticides, that over time will break down your body and make you ill, right? How do you justify, excluding people from education because you deem them as inferior? Or maybe even a savage. Okay? How do you justify that, right? Because, just like what they had did to women. They were like, well, women, they're too dumb, to, understand, mathematics or, the concepts, of life, or, they had 1,001 deaths for women when it came to allowing women, to be in the workplace, to be in control of themselves and, probably their children, only to find out that they were wrong, right? Statistically, when you have a society where so many women, have been abandoned with children and still successfully raise these children, what does that say about the men who abandon their own family? They don't want to say anything about it. Of course they don't. And they don't want you to say anything about it. They want a meme. Shit happens. Things happen. That's what they want. And they want you to accept that as part of reality, right? They want a non-reality to replace what is reality. And the reality is that women, through blood, sweat, and saliva, have raised children where many men have failed. Even though not only were they, given privilege to jobs just so they could raise their families, right? They did. And we see this through many videos where, people are like, yes, he has a family, he wants to take care of his family, and, or he has a wife, he wants to take care of his wife, therefore you should give him a job, right? But then they don't say the same thing when it comes to a woman who has a family. right? Instead, she's being persecuted with morality, right? How come, you didn't choose a better man? Like, what? You talking about choosing a better man that you're now supporting as he's trying to have this other family number 3, family number 5, right? Or, who's out here running around here trying to evade child support of his illegitimate children. Okay? So they're like, well, women can't technically, evade, their responsibilities because, it's like, exactly. If women can't evade their responsibilities of a child, then why is it you get the support to the man? Oh, because it's a man's world. Oh, because men get destructive if they don't get their way. Oh. Men understand that, cooperation with men is required, but oppression with women is acceptable, right? So don't call me a liar when I say they weaponize our men. Now we're starting to see right now, how muscular women can get if they change their diet, to high protein and they work out. Right? So that goes back to, how they used to suppress women from being in the gyms. They tried to suppress women from eating, the high protein meals. Right? And encouraging them to eat, a vegetarian meal. There's nothing wrong with a vegetarian meal except vegetables, even though they may be high in minerals and life, right? Vegetables don't have enough calories. Okay? So a cup of spinach or a cup of coleslaw without any dressing or anything on it is only 25 to 30 calories. Right? So if you need, let's say, 2,000 calories just to live every day, how much vegetation do you need to eat to maintain your body? That's why so many vegetarians are encouraged, to eat starches and yeast. Not to mention how fast vegetation breaks down compared to other types of foods. You would definitely have to start bringing in fruits and fruits and sugars. So that's one of the things that I do want to look up. Can you become diabetic from eating natural fruits? Of course you can. I don't even have to look that up. Because a sugar is a sugar is a sugar. And they tried to say that even a sugar substitute will trick the body into believing that it's actually a sugar. And it's like, well, that argument doesn't really fly with me, because even though the body can be tricked, right, a trick can only go so far, right? Realistically, you can only go so far. I remember being out this way, about 20 years ago, maybe 20 something years ago, and this hadn't even been developed yet. It was just a field. Because I remember losing my keys right up here. My car keys. That's when that joker went left. He did. He went absolutely left. That's when he decided, to be against me rather than for me. And actually, make moves on it. And I guess it was also because, in my mind, I was spending way too much time, supporting him, his goals, his weaknesses, and it was stagnating me and my progress. And that's when I became enemy number one to him. It's like, she's trying to get away. I ain't gonna let her get away. And I was like, you was never supposed to stay. Remember the little back bag, that you said, you was a transient. You was a homosexual. You wasn't supposed to stay here. You was supposed to be just passing through. Promising that, you wasn't going to take them no place, that you wasn't going to bring them back. And that was your promise, was, I'll never take you anywhere and not bring you back. So you're not going to break me without restoration, etc., etc., etc. Okay? Of course, like I said, once he determined that I was enemy number one, and I was like, this has gone on way too long, then, he decided, to infiltrate, my environment, my neighborhood, my workplace, my family, and he was using diabolical, dastardly tactics that, should only be used on an enemy, not an ex. When you use those type of tactics because, a romantic situation just didn't work out, you've lost your mind. You've literally lost your mind. well, it was a broken heart. Well, let's just call you heartless. Let's just call you heartless. Because when you start using like war tactics on a past romantic situation, that's not a broken heart. That is not a broken heart. You had to first have a heart in order for it to be broken. Ooh, it is hot in the sunlight. 81 degrees. I guess it's because I'm facing the sun. It makes it seem like it's hotter. Let's turn on the air. Shit. Ooh, because it's hot. Situation that I was in, it was a situation that never should have happened. And that's why it did seem so enchanting in the beginning, because it was a situation that never should have happened. It was a big fucking mistake. And I can actually say all of the relationships that I've been in that did work out was a big fucking mistake. I'm not sitting up here pining over what coulda, shoulda, woulda. Right? It just was a mistake. Right? Hey, I didn't know garden came all the way out here, but it does. This is part of garden all the way out here. And then it goes up further north too. that's a hard pill for a person to say, that they were a mistake. But I mean, let's talk about that, right? Like when I was born, my parents were going through some hard times, right? And they were facing a lot of difficulties. Can I say that I was a love child? In a way, I could say that I was a love child, mainly because, you're talking about, people of different races, trying to make it work out against the odds. Right? So in a way, I'm kind of a love child, but then in a way, I'm not, because racism is so strong and so defeating. To a lot of people who don't want to appreciate, racism as the spice, not racism, but races, like different races on the earth, like the spice of life. Because in our society, even when they try to think of race as the spice of life, they'll still have spices that they'll value more than others. Like saffron, for instance. Who would have knew that saffron was such an expensive type of spice? Right? Anyway, so now people are starting to see, the collateral damages and stuff that has occurred throughout history, and wondering, was it really worth this so-called evolution that has been imposed upon the Americas? Now, originally the Americas was supposed to be the land of the free, the land of the beautiful, yes, right? And yet, in the background, there were, slavery, rape, genocide, okay, and pillaging of, the Americas. All right? And so here we are now, in the age of Aquarius, where, innovation and technology has definitely opened our eyes and expanded our knowledge that typically was held in secret, or secret enough to spin a certain narrative on it, right? And this is where we're at, trying to determine, where do we go from here? Where do we go from here? Right? Everybody's wondering, now what? Now what? Is globalization a bad thing? When we live in a society that, has the logistics to import and export the way that it does, right? And we see even in our own community, right? Like during the pandemic, where there were people, who was able to work remotely, deciding that, oh shit, they can now, live outside of the country and make, 6 figures that they was making in order to barely survive in New York. Right? Just like I didn't understand when I moved from California and had to take a pay cut when I moved over here to Texas because of the cost of living difference was huge. Okay? So then you have to ask yourself, do you equalize the cost of living for everybody across the board, or do you allow for this, differences, to occur, right? Like that place where I was out at Levon's, right? A brand new house on acreage, right? I'm sure you can get at least half an acre out there. You can buy a house brand new for $400,000, right? But it's a developing market. It's not developed right now. And as it starts to develop, so does the taxes on that property. Okay. You can also get a house in town, in the Metroplex, for $400,000. But you're not going to get a brand new house. You're going to be in a developed community, in a older community. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So that's something that towns appealing enough to get people to move out there. Right? But you also, have to realize that once they're developed, the prices are going to be significantly higher and more appealing than living someplace where, the buildings are old. The pests are more innovative. They know how to, to move around and survive. Right. So, yeah, we live a life where, we try to see, what we could get along with symbiotically, right? And, a lot of times we make mistakes in our judgment. And you can see that, especially after you break up, where, what you thought was a symbiotic relationship, that now all of a sudden you then became an enemy, an ops. It's like, how did that happen? Definitely a mistake in judgment. Right? So right now, a lot of us are starting to wonder, with all of this dissension that we have in the United States, are there going to be states that are going to try to pull out of the Union? Because they just disagree. Like, here's one of the things that my mind had said was, oh my gosh, could California be the Ukraine of America? You see what I'm saying? And they're very well starting to look like it too. That, California is definitely looking like the Ukraine of America. The chastising, oh my God. CVS must be suffering. The CVS has suffered for sure. That was such a quick transition from CVS to a healthcare facility that's mind-blowing. And they have a tower on property. What the hell? Anyway, so yeah, recommend it because, California has different, climates, and that the Americas definitely don't want to release as part of their the way that they envision the Americas to be. Now, if I can make it back home without spending any money, I could say that this whole outing was a success. That I was able to get out and go someplace and do something and it not cost me any money. What would that be? That would be to to go to a place, a campground, a lake campground that would typically cost money just to spend a day there, just to have access to, and it didn't cost me anything. And I wasn't gonna spend a whole day there, that's just not in me to do. I wish it was kind of something that, was in me to do, but it's just not. As you can see, I only spent, maybe a half an hour there, and then we skedaddled out of there. That's because I like moving more than just sitting. If I'm gonna sit, I'm gonna sit at home. But then again, if I had a tent, could I camp? Would I camp? I doubt it. Some air. My mind got stimulated. Really happy. Felt like a weekend day. It's just Wednesday. So one of the things that, I was trying to figure out, right? Because in this economy, in order to get protein, right? The cheapest protein is pork, turkey, and chicken. Okay, that's the cheapest protein that you can buy. Now, it's been brought to my attention that the reason why they're telling people don't... Oh, there go my battery telling me it needs to be recharged. that the reason why they don't encourage people to keep eating pork, it's not only the high salt content or sugar content, no matter how they cure it, but the curing is not as efficient as, they would like it to be. Therefore, pork meat has a lot more parasites. Okay? Because, I eat a lot of pork. I do. Bacon, sausage, hot wings. Those people are just sitting there on that corner for some reason. And I know they don't live in that house. I know this. But they are definitely sitting in somebody's, on a corner piece of somebody's yard. Okay, I forgot what I was talking about. Boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Now, there looked like there was a leak outside. People were splashing in the water, driving by. Like they had to release a valve. Oh my. They got a whole BMW in that garage of that lady that I said looked like she has strange friends. I guess she upgraded. Or somebody downgraded. Because this is not the typical, like attractive, Instagram model, This lady here is like a biggin, right? She like one of them women that you see on these videos that these men will, come in and, and feed and, and just play with her rolls of fat.